That's really what it is. Before you see it on this level before you see physical existence on this level, you have to understand that something has been taken away. Most people don't realize it, but their perception, their awareness is extremely limited. I mean, now, today, you can hear a lot of people talking about this kind of feeling. Oh, perception is limited. You hear a lot of that coming from David Icke. But how is perception limited? In what way is perception limited? What is it that is missing? And what is missing is the desire for freedom. The actualization of that desire. People think that freedom is a set of rights you are given as a human being to be able to live the way you want and to express yourself, your self-consciousness, to express your uniqueness and your individuality. That's what people think that freedom really is. But what freedom really is, because that's the physical manifestation of a freedom, but where it is coming from is filled with falsehoods. Because people are, even in places where people are able to express themselves, the uniqueness of themselves in very creative ways, people are not free. The place that freedom is coming from is a place that is filled with falsehoods. Because you are not really free to express your individuality. You are free to express certain aspects of individuality, certain unique aspects of individuality, which are tolerated by the entire group. That's why you have laws and all that. But what it truly means to be free, to be anything and all that you can and want to be, that experience is missing. And some people think that this experience means that wickedness and evil can no, it is the exact opposite, and I'm going to explain how and why. Because it is limitation that brings evil and wickedness, limitation of perception. And in order to enforce limitation, you need rules and laws. In fact, most people are not aware that the experience of reality they have is very distorted in such a way that for you to be able to, you look at something like a law court, a court of law, right? It's supposed to do what? They will tell you that this is a symbol that represents the promulgation of justice. What people don't realize, because the perception is limited, is that the existence of that court, that physical entity, what it's telling you is that there is no justice. That thing only exists because there is no justice. If there were justice, okay, and you have to understand where justice comes from. If there were justice, you wouldn't need a law court. There will be nothing to argue about. What are you debating? What are you arguing? You only argue when there's a conflict of some kind, or a misrepresentation, or when two representations do not align. In such a situation, you need law courts. Some people don't understand that you have universities and big centers of learning and research. It's because people are ignorant. That's why those things exist. It's not because people are knowledgeable. It's because people are ignorant. Now, how does this tie back to perception? The nature of perception that I'm describing here is one where there is a 100%, when I mean 100, I mean there is an established faith that the spirit of a human being and God, they are not separate. They have never been separate. There has never been any separation of there is God and this is man. The only way to come to that perception is when your seat of conviction, and these terms I've explained them in earlier podcasts, your seat of conviction is the place where you store your central faith. And faith does not imply religion. I need people to really understand this. Religion is not about faith, it's about belief. Now, that central place has been infected by a parasite. It is that parasite that is the nature of the limitation. It is the parasite that distorts how people perceive themselves. And in tandem, how people perceive the world. And in tandem, how people perceive God. I'll talk about the nature of this parasite soon. But for now, that's really what it is. There is something in your seat of conviction that gives form and structure to something that is very limited, very unlimited, sorry. Something that doesn't have any form, something that takes the form of whatever it wants to take. It's not constrained by any rules per se. It can mimic whatever it wants to mimic. Whatever it wants to become, it can become. Okay? So if it needs laws, it produces laws within itself. Because from it doesn't need to give justice. It carries justice just the way that it is. And so the qualitative experience of a group of people like this coming together, it means that they don't need police stations. They don't need cops. They don't need law courts. They don't need all these. They don't need government, administration, and all these things. They don't need these things. These things only exist because they don't exist. I need you to understand what I'm talking about. What you see as an administrative unit in the world, maybe governments all over the world, or some type of centralized control, of even at federal level, all these different levels of government. The reason why is because within the human being, they are totally blank. They don't know what to do or how to feel. And so they need these institutions to guide human behavior. Otherwise, the whole thing just turns into, chaos or randomness or craziness or whatever you want to call it. But what I'm trying to say in this podcast is that these externalizations, they exist simply because they do not exist where they are supposed to exist, which is within your seat of conviction. And that's because that seat of conviction has been infected by a parasite. And what that parasite does is it does not allow the full expression of human uniqueness or human ability or human potential or the human spirit, whatever you want to call it. It does not. Rather, what it tries to do is it tries to limit it because its preference is for the creation of self-consciousness. And there's nothing wrong with this per se, because self-consciousness is what we need to actually, differentiate in some sense. But the environment, or the nature of this parasite, is to keep squeezing. Okay? And what it does is it keeps squeezing, and the more it keeps squeezing, that squeeze is the installation of boundaries. And so the tendency is the creation of many, many laws. It's almost like human beings exist to create laws. There's a law for this, a law for... Very soon there will be a law for breathing, a law for dancing, a law for... These are the recipes of death. And you need to understand that the parasite that has infected human nature, the seat of conviction, that is what brings death. Because you cannot unmake God and His world. You can't, even if you're not comfortable with the word God, and you don't want to call it that, you want to call it something else, it doesn't matter. Let's just call it a balance, a unity, or whatever, okay? You cannot unmake it. You can't. It's like trying to break the law of conservation of energy in an internal combustion engine. You see, you just... what they do is they rearrange themselves in ways to restore balance in opposition to what you are doing. So they oppose you. There's a reason why they oppose you, because what you're doing is you are trying to create something that doesn't exist. Something that is not allowed per se. You see? So when you initiate A, B has to balance it up. That is the nature of what you call physics or chemistry or whatever in the physical world. But this parasite, right? I want to talk about it last. I don't want to tell you what it is now. I want to talk about it at the end of the podcast. But I just want to explain to you what it does. What it does is attack the nature of humankind that is already default printed into your seat of conviction. And what it does is it makes sure that you do not know. It makes sure that you are not aware. You can't feel. You cannot, because expression, the way you express yourself is linked to what you feel, what you perceive. So perception and expression, they are literally the same thing. So what this parasite does is to kill all the modes of perception that are open to a human being, that allow a human being to feel the almost unlimited potential of his perception, so as to restrict that perception to a narrow, very narrow set of awareness, where you are now focusing on, because you don't have, it's like insects that have antennas. When they lose their antenna, you know, navigation becomes very difficult. So what has been taken from a human being is the navigational capacity of his unlimited unconscious. So that